The numbers that started the panic were registered on March 4th, 2026 at precisely 6:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. At a routine Canadian Hydrographic Service water level monitoring station in Thunder Bay, Ontario, an automated sensor flagged a reading that shouldn't have been possible. The water level of Lake Superior had dropped 1.3 centimeters overnight. To a casual observer, 1.3 centimeters is a rounding error, a slight dip in the tide. To a hydrologist, it is a nightmare. Lake Superior's surface area across the Canadian side alone is staggering, but the lake in its entirety covers approximately 82,100 square kilometers. A 1.3 centimeter drop across that vast icy expanse represents a volume of water so colossal that the technician on duty, a 14-year veteran of Environment and Climate Change Canada named Dr. Sarah Tremblay, ran the calculation 4 times before she dared to flag it for the Geological Survey of Canada. She was looking at the overnight disappearance of approximately 427 billion liters of fresh water. That is not a typo. That is the volume of nearly 170,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, vanished in less than 12 hours. What you are looking at right now is not a drought. It is not evaporation. It is not the result of a seasonal shift or a deficit in winter snowpack. This is a geological event that defies 150 years of modern Canadian earth sciences. Lake Superior is draining. It is hemorrhaging water through a massive, undetected tunnel system beneath its floor. A void so deep and so vast that the researchers who first saw the sonar data refused to file their report because they assumed the equipment was broken. It wasn't broken. And what is happening right now beneath the surface of the world's largest freshwater lake is forcing scientists at Natural Resources Canada to rewrite everything they thought they knew about the tectonic stability of the Canadian Shield. Hi, my name is Daniel, and this is Natural Disasters. By March 6, the alarm had spread along the North Shore. Monitoring stations at Marathon, Ontario, and Michippicoten confirmed the same terrifying anomaly. The drop was consistent, directional, and it was accelerating. By March 8th, the rate was calculated with enough precision to produce the numbers that is currently circulating through the highest levels of Public Safety Canada. 17.8 million liters every single hour, around the clock, vanishing into a subsurface abyss. Dr. Julian Mercier, a senior hydrologist with the Geological Survey of Canada in Ottawa, reviewed the consolidated data on the morning of March 9th. He sent an encrypted email to the Minister of Natural Resources with a subject line that contained no technical jargon, no cautious academic hedging. The subject line simply read, "Something is very wrong." The clock is ticking on the greatest freshwater reserve on the planet, and the drain has just been pulled. The chronology of the discovery is as chilling as the water itself. On March 10, 2026, a joint task force led by Natural Resources Canada and the Canadian Coast Guard deployed 2 dedicated research vessels, the CCGS Limnos and the CCGS Griffon, to conduct high-resolution multi-beam sonar mapping along Superior's central basin, specifically targeting the deep trenches south of St. Ignace Island. The mission was officially categorized as a structural integrity assessment, but the atmosphere on the bridges of those ships was one of suppressed dread. The scientists were looking for a leak they hoped didn't exist. At 14:43 on March 11th, the Limnos, operating in a sector approximately 60 kilometers southeast of Thunder Bay, recorded a return signal that effectively broke the mission software. The sonar operator, a senior technician with the Canadian Hydrographic Service named Marc-André Leblanc, initially flagged the data as a phantom bottom or a software glitch. The equipment indicated a vertical drop so sudden and so profound that the signal couldn't find the floor. Leblanc requested a second pass, slowing the Limnos to a crawl. The second pass confirmed the impossible. At a depth of 190 meters below the surface, the lake floor simply stops. There is a hole. It is not a jagged fracture or a tectonic rift. It is a perfectly sculpted, circular tunnel entrance, measuring 21 meters in diameter. Its walls are smooth, displaying the unmistakable scalloping patterns geologists associate with centuries of high-pressure fluid erosion in carbonate rock. Here is the geophysical reality that has the Geological Survey of Canada in a state of clinical shock. Lake Superior sits on the Canadian Shield, a 1.1 billion-year-old crystalline basement of granite and basalt. This rock is among the hardest and most stable on the planet. It does not dissolve. It does not form caves. Yet the sonar data, processed at the GSC's laboratory in Ottawa late that night, revealed a carbonate intrusion, a massive, previously undetected vein of ancient limestone and dolomite, trapped like a layer of soft tissue between the volcanic plates of the mid-continent rift. This hidden layer, shielded from surface detection for over a century by the sheer density of the overlying igneous rock, has been quietly hollowed out by acidic groundwater over millennia. On March 4th, it appears the roof of this hidden cathedral finally gave way under the weight of the water above. By March 12th, the gravity of the situation shifted from hydrological to structural. GNSS, Global Navigation Satellite System stations, operated by Natural Resources Canada in Nipigon and Terrace Bay, began registering subtle but undeniable crustal offsets. The ground isn't just shaking, it is reacting to the shifting mass. At 9:12 a.m. on March 13th, a seismograph located at a depth of 8 kilometers near the Slate Islands detected a cluster of harmonic tremors. In volcanic or tectonic settings, harmonic tremors suggest fluid moving under immense pressure. In the context of Lake Superior, it suggests that the tunnel isn't a dead-end pipe. It is a conduit feeding a vast, high-pressure aquifer network that spans the breadth of the province. The rate of flow was recalculated that afternoon using flow velocity sensors dropped by the CCGS Griffon. The number is worse than the initial estimates, 17.8 million liters per hour. To put that into perspective for a Canadian audience, that is the equivalent of draining the entire volume of Ottawa's Rideau Canal every 15 minutes. The pressure at the tunnel entrance is calculated at over 1,900 kilopascals. This is not a passive leak, it is a high-velocity hydraulic drain. Infrastructure vulnerability is now the primary concern for public safety deliter. Verigul Pit, the Meitekolegde. The Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway is the industrial heart of the country. In the port of Thunder Bay, the largest grain handling port in the world, the water level has already receded far enough to threaten the draft requirements of the massive lakers that carry Canadian wheat to the world. At the Bear Point water treatment plant, which provides drinking water to over 110,000 residents, engineers are monitoring the intake pipes with a precision that borders on obsession. The intakes were designed for a specific hydraulic head. If the lake level drops another 30 centimeters, the pumps will begin to cavitate. If they cavitate, the city's water supply fails. Dr. Hélène van der Berg, a geomorphologist at the University of Toronto, who was flown to the command center in Sault Ste. Marie on March 14th, described the situation in a leaked internal memo. We are observing a coupled system failure. The hydraulic pressure of the lake is accelerating the chemical dissolution of the carbonate tunnel, which in turn increases the flow rate. This is a self-reinforcing loop. Every hour we wait, the drain gets wider. We are not just losing water, we are watching the mechanical erosion of the continent's foundation in real time. The bedrock is being consumed from the inside out. To grasp the sheer scale of the catastrophe unfolding in the Superior Basin, we have to look back 8,200 years, to the most significant hydrological event in Canadian history, the final drainage of glacial Lake Agassiz. When the ice dam at the edge of the Laurentide ice sheet failed, an estimated 160,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water surged into the Hudson Bay in a matter of months. It altered the salinity of the North Atlantic and plunged the planet into a centuries-long cooling period. For decades, geologists at the University of Manitoba and the Geological Survey of Canada pointed to Agassiz as a relic of a chaotic glacial past, a once-in-a-forever event. They were wrong. What we are witnessing today is the Agassiz event in reverse. Instead of a surface breach, we have a subsurface catastrophic failure. And this time, the water isn't heading for the ocean, it's heading into the crust. Statistics released by Natural Resources Canada on March 15, 2026, suggest a forecast model that is increasingly green. At the current acceleration rate, the Superior Sink is projected to lower the lake's mean level by 0.6 meters by the end of the year. In the world of maritime logistics, 60 centimeters is the difference between a functioning economy and a total standstill. The port of Thunder Bay, which moves over 25 million tons of cargo annually, is already calculating the draft deficit. Every centimeter lost equals 150 fewer tons of grain per vessel. In Canadian dollars, the projected economic hit to the Great Lakes shipping corridor is estimated at $4.2 billion by the fourth quarter of 2026 alone. But the economic cost pales in comparison to the geophysical implications. Dr. Aris Thorne, a specialist in crustal dynamics at the University of British Columbia, has proposed a terrifying theory regarding the trigger. For 10,000 years, the Canadian Shield has been undergoing isostatic rebound, literally springing back upward after being crushed by the weight of 2-kilometer thick glaciers. Dr. Thorne's team believes that this subtle upward movement finally reached a mechanical snapping point in the deep carbonate layer beneath the lake. The shield is not a static block of granite, Thorne stated in a press briefing from Vancouver. It is a pressurized system. By rising just a fraction of a millimeter too far, the Precambrian cap cracked, exposing the pressurized carbonate void to the massive hydraulic weight of the lake above. We didn't just find the hole, we triggered a pressure release valve for the entire continent. This is what scientists call system coupling. The weight of Lake Superior, nearly 12 quadrillion kilograms of water, is now acting as a piston, forcing itself into the newly opened conduit. As the water enters the deep crustal void, it begins to lubricate ancient, dormant fault lines associated with the mid-continent rift. On March 16th, Natural Resources Canada Seismic Network recorded a magnitude 3.2 earthquake with an epicenter 15 kilometers directly beneath the tunnel entrance. This wasn't a tectonic shift, it was a collapse event. The void is getting larger because the roof is falling in. The historical parallels here are haunting. In 1903, the town of Frank, Alberta, was buried when 82 million tons of limestone slid off Turtle Mountain in less than 100 seconds. Geologists later found that internal karstification and water pressure had hollowed out the mountain's core until it could no longer support its own weight. Now imagine that process happening at the bottom of the world's largest lake. We are not just looking at a leak, we are looking at the potential for a massive submarine caldera-style collapse. If the igneous shelf above the carbonate layer fails, the resulting displacement of water would create a sage, a standing wave, that would devastate every coastal community from Wawa to Sault Ste. Marie. The most disturbing twist in the GSC's latest modeling involves the final destination of the water. Deep cycle chemical analysis of the water entering the tunnel shows a rapid increase in salinity and mineral content within seconds of it passing the 300-meter mark. This suggests that the Lake Superior water is not just filling a cave, it is being forced into a hypersaline, deep earth aquifer that may connect all the way to the Western Canadian sedimentary basin. We are losing the planet's purest fresh water to a subterranean salt trap. The models show no sign of stabilization. There is no plug in nature's inventory for a 21-meter wide vortex under 2 kilopascals of pressure. The data is clear. The lake is no longer a closed system, it is an open drain. While the scientists in Ottawa and Vancouver argue over fluid dynamics and crustal failure, the reality of the Superior sink is being felt on the ground and on the water by Canadians whose lives are tied to the Great Lakes. To understand the human cost, you have to meet Elias Kakegamik. Elias is a 58-year-old commercial fisherman and a member of the Red Rock Indian Band near Nipigon. His family has harvested Lake Superior's whitefish and trout for 5 generations. On March 14, 2026, Elias pulled his nets near the Black Bay Peninsula and found something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't just that the nets were light, it was the water itself. The lake was breathing the wrong way, Elias told a reporter from CBC North. Usually, the currents here are predictable. You know the flow. But that morning, the water was pulling south-southeast with a strength I've never seen. It was like the whole basin was being tugged from the bottom. Elias's boat, the Spirit of the North, nearly grounded on a shoal that has been submerged under at least 4 meters of water since the 1970s. For the indigenous communities of the North Shore, this isn't just a geological anomaly. It is a violation of a sacred ancestral relationship. The loss of the fishery doesn't just mean an economic hit, it means the death of a culture. In Thunder Bay, the logistical heart of the Canadian Prairie's export economy, the tension has reached a breaking point. James McNally, the director of operations for one of the city's largest grain terminals, stands on a pier that is now visibly higher out of the water than it was 3 weeks ago. We move the world's bread from here, McNally says, looking out at the line of bulk carriers anchored in the harbor, unable to dock. If those ships can't load to capacity, the global supply chain for Canadian wheat collapses. We are already seeing a 15% reduction in allowable tonnage. The Port of Thunder Bay estimates that for every centimeter the water drops, the regional economy loses 140 million Canadian dollars in annual trade value. As of today, the bill is already totaling over $1.8 billion in lost contracts and demurrage fees. The shipping lanes of the Great Lakes are the jugular vein of Canadian industry, and they are currently being throttled by a hole in the earth that no one can see. The crisis has now moved inland, threatening the very power that keeps Ontario running. Dr. Ananya Sharma, a senior structural engineer with Ontario Power Generation, OPG, is currently stationed at the Emergency Command Center in Sault Ste. Marie. Her focus is the massive hydroelectric facilities that harness the outflow of Superior into the St. Mary's River. Hydroelectric power is a game of head pressure, Dr. Sharma explains. You need a specific height of water to turn those turbines. If Superior drops below the critical threshold, the flow through the Sault Ste. Marie logs and the power plants will plummet. We are looking at a potential loss of 1,000 megawatts of clean energy. That's enough to power a city the size of Mississauga. On March 17th, OPG quietly issued a grid alert, warning that if the drainage rate doesn't stabilize, rolling brownouts across northern Ontario may become a reality by the summer. The cost to retrofit the intakes or find alternative baseload power is estimated in the tens of billions of dollars. Beyond the economy, there is the immediate threat to public safety. In the town of Marathon, Ontario, local officials have begun the preemptive relocation of residents in the Pebble Beach area. The concern isn't just the receding water, but the stability of the shoreline itself. As the lake level drops, the pore pressure within the coastal sediment shifts. This can lead to massive, unforeseen landslides. On March 18th, a 200-meter section of a hiking trail in Pukasco National Park simply slid into the lake without warning. No one was hurt, but Parks Canada has since closed the entire coastal backcountry. The fear is palpable in the voices of those tasked with the response. Captain Robert Gauthier of the Canadian Coast Guard described the scene near the vortex sector. We dropped a remotely operated vehicle on a tether. We didn't even get close to the entrance. The turbulence at 150 meters depth was so violent, It snapped a reinforced steel cable like it was sewing thread. There's a sound down there, a low-frequency hum that vibrates through the hull of the ship. It's the sound of 1 billion liters of water being squeezed through a needle's eye. The psychological impact on the region is devastating. For the people of the North Shore, Superior has always been the inland sea, vast, eternal, and unchanging. To see it receding, to see the skeletons of 19th century shipwrecks emerging from the mud in places like Rossport, is a form of collective trauma. Public Safety Canada has deployed mental health crisis teams to communities along the shore, but the anxiety remains. Telecoms are also under threat. Several sublacustrine fiber optic cables that provide high-speed internet to remote northern communities cross the very region where the seismic tremors are most active. If those lines snap due to ground subsidence, thousands of Canadians will be cut off from emergency services. We are looking at a total system failure, ecological, economic, and social. And as the sun sets over a shrinking Thunder Bay, the only thing anyone can hear is the silence of a lake that is slowly, inevitably, going dark. As we move into the late spring of 2026, the question is no longer whether we can stop the Superior sink, but how much of the Canadian heartland will be left standing when the water finally finds its new, terrifying equilibrium. The models produced by the Geological Survey of Canada and Natural Resources Canada are now projecting a reality that was unthinkable just months ago. The Superior staircase is collapsing. To understand the gravity of this, you have to realize that Lake Superior is the headwater of the entire Great Lakes St. Lawrence system. It sits 183 meters above sea level. Every drop of water that disappears into the tunnel system is water that will never reach Lake Huron, Lake Erie, or the St. Lawrence River. We are witnessing the slow-motion dewatering of the most important inland waterway on the planet. By 2027, if the current drain rate of 17.8 million liters per hour holds, or continues its projected 14% month-over-month acceleration, the impacts will spread far beyond the shoreline. The most immediate threat is to the Trans-Canada Highway and the dual-track rail corridors of the Canadian Pacific and Canadian National Railways. These arteries are the only physical links between eastern and western Canada. Between Nipigon and Wawa, Highway 17 is carved into the very Precambrian cliffs that are now being destabilized by shifting groundwater levels. As the lake level drops, the pore water pressure within the coastal rock mass is changing. Engineers from the Ontario Ministry of Transportation have already detected macroseismic creep along the railway embankments near Marathon. If the ground moves just a few centimeters, the rail lines that carry $1 billion in goods every day will snap. We aren't just looking at a hydrological crisis. We are looking at the potential for the physical bisection of the Canadian nation. The ecological consequences are equally apocalyptic. Lake Superior is the cold, oxygen-rich heart of North America. Its massive volume acts as a thermal regulator for the entire region. But as the volume decreases, the lake's ability to resist summer heating diminishes. Dr. Elaine van der Berg's team at the University of Toronto has modeled a thermal tipping point. By 2028, the average deep water temperature of Superior could rise by as much as 3 degrees Celsius. This sounds small, but it is a death sentence for the lake's cold water specialists, the lake trout and whitefish that have defined the northern fishery for millennia. In their place, invasive species and toxic cyanobacteria blooms, once restricted to the shallower, warmer lower lakes, will migrate north. The pristine, blue Superior is turning green, and there is no known way to reverse the chemistry of a quadrillion-gallon basin. The engineering community has reached a consensus of silence. The three intervention concepts, deep grouting, controlled collapse, and the bypass canal, have all been deemed technically unfeasible or too dangerous. On March 25, 2026, a leaked transcript from a closed-door session of the Emergency Working Group in Sault Ste. Marie revealed the grim assessment of Dr. Julian Mercier. We are attempting to fight the physics of the mid-continent rift with 21st century plumbing. It is like trying to plug a bullet hole in a dam with a piece of chewing gum. The hydraulic head of the lake is the engine of its own destruction. Until the void beneath the crust is filled or the lake floor undergoes a total structural collapse to seal the conduit, the draining will continue. We are spectators to a planetary-scale geological event. This brings us to the nightmare scenario that keeps the seismologists at Natural Resources Canada awake. The tunnel corridor follows a linear path that correlates with the ancient fault lines of the Canadian Shield. If the hydromechanical erosion continues to widen the tunnel, it could eventually trigger a trapdoor collapse, a massive section of the lake floor, potentially kilometers across, dropping into the subterranean void. The resulting displacement would create a mega tsunami within the enclosed basin of Superior. Waves measuring 15 to 20 meters would strike the coast of Ontario within minutes. Communities like Terrace Bay and Rossport would be erased before an emergency alert could even be broadcast. This isn't alarmism, it is the mathematical reality of a collapsing geological roof. As of today, the water level gauges at Thunder Bay and Michipicoten continue their downward march. The numbers don't lie, and they don't care about our infrastructure or our history. Lake Superior has held its shape for 10,000 years, a monument to the end of the last ice age. But the earth underneath it has decided it is time for a change. The tunnel is still there, the vortex is still spinning, and 17.8 million liters of the purest water on earth is vanishing into the dark every